Welcome, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, a really fundamental question that's kind of shaped the whole story of artificial intelligence.
Mm.
Why is it that systems built on seemingly perfect logic, rules, often just fall apart when they meet the real world?
That's a great question. There's this undeniable appeal, almost seductive, isn't there? The idea of a machine operating with just flawless logic, following a clear, defined set of rules.
Totally. You think back to those early dreams of AI, right? Systems that could just breeze through logic puzzles, master checkers, or even IBM Watson winning Jeopardy back in 2011. There was this powerful belief underneath it all that you could actually codify intelligence, just write it all down in enough if-then statements to cover, well, everything.
And that optimism, it's incredibly relatable. I think we've all been there.
Yeah, who hasn't wished for a simple rule book when you're facing some really complex situation, personally or professionally, or just felt that, deep satisfaction when a piece of tech just works exactly like it's supposed to. No surprises.
Exactly. And that intuition, that pursuit of perfect order, that really laid the foundation for what we now call symbolic AI, or sometimes expert systems.
It wasn't just theoretical, though, was it?
Yeah.
It tapped into something deeply human, that desire for predictability, for control.
Absolutely. Building machines based on these explicit, structured rules, it just felt like the most rational way to get to AI. The promise was so alluring. Clarity, predictability, total control over decisions. Researchers genuinely thought they were building these perfect miniature worlds inside the machines, worlds where every scenario, no matter how complex, could be accounted for, and every decision just logically flowed from these core principles.
That's a great way to put it. You can really see the vision they had. But, okay, here's the core problem we're going to really dive into today.
Mm.
And it's a story that just echoes through AI's history. These expert systems, the symbolic AI, powerful as they were in controlled settings, they just repeatedly buckled and broke down when they faced the messy, unpredictable, often contradictory reality of the actual world.
Right. And this deep dive, it isn't just about pointing out a few sort of minor technical glitches. It's about uncovering these fundamental limitations that really forced a complete, probably painful reevaluation of how we even try to build intelligent machines.
It's the story of when those carefully crafted rules worked well until they didn't. That's the crux of it.
Precisely. And that lesson, it's not just history, it resonates powerfully today, even with the AI we have now. So our mission today is to unpack these key breakdowns, understand why they happened, and really grasp that profound, enduring idea. Rules just can't capture the uncertainty of life.
And you'll see how even today's much more advanced AI systems, well, they still grapple with very similar challenges, though maybe in more sophisticated, sometimes subtle ways.
It's this constant tension, isn't it, between the elegance of pure logic and the, well, chaos of real existence.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We start at the dawn of symbolic AI. And it was truly driven by this huge ambition, codify thought itself. The idea was simple on the surface, but revolutionary. Represent knowledge, represent reasoning, using explicit symbols and logical rules. Basically, a massive collection of if-thens.
And a lot of the groundwork for this, it goes way back to the mid-19th century. George Boole, his Mathematics of the Intellect, that provided the foundation for formal logic. Imagine formal logic almost becoming a programming language for reason itself, a way to precisely map out and automate how humans think. It felt like the key.
It must have seemed like they were on the cusp of something huge.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating is just how elegant these systems looked on paper. Early AI researchers, they were really buoyed by quick successes in solving these neat, tidy logic problems. The optimism was palpable. They genuinely expected AI to beat chess grandmasters within like a decade.
Wow, a decade. That's ambitious.
It shows the huge hopes they pinned on this structured, rule-based approach. The whole idea was, if we can just meticulously map human reasoning into these formal systems, piece by logical piece, intelligence would just emerge. It felt like an engineering problem, building intelligence brick by logical brick.
And it wasn't just wishful thinking. These ambitions rested on some pretty solid theoretical foundations. Take constraint satisfaction problems, CSPs. At their heart, they're like mathematical puzzles. You assign values to variables, but you have to follow specific rules or conditions.
Right. Algorithms like depth-first search were designed to solve these. They'd meticulously assign values, making sure they fit the constraints like, say, A has to be less than B, B less than C, and A, B, C can only be chosen from 1, 2, 3, 4. And the clever part is how they prune the search. If a path violates a constraint, boom, it's cut off. very efficient, but only within that clearly defined problem space.
So they were good at solving problems with clear boundaries.
Exactly. And to make them even more efficient seem more intelligent, researchers added clever tricks called heuristics. A classic example is the least constraining value heuristic. Think about coloring a map, no adjacent regions the same color. This heuristic would say, okay, choose red for this region, if picking red leaves more options open for its neighbors compared to picking blue.
So it's trying to keep options open down the line?
Precisely. It's an early attempt to embed clever, rule-based shortcuts, rules of thumb, to guide the search efficiently, trying to avoid getting painted into a corner, so to speak, a very smart use of rules within its limits.
Right, making the rules work smarter within their little playground. And then building on that, you get logic programming.
Yeah, concepts like horn clauses, integrity constraints, without getting too deep into the formal logic.
Please don't.
Right. An integrity constraint might basically say, if conditions A, B, and C are all true together, then that's impossible or invalid according to our knowledge. It's a way to enforce consistency. These tools gave systems a really powerful, formal way to do rigorous deduction. They could prove if certain combinations of facts were false based on the rules they knew.
Incredibly precise reasoning, then, as long as you stayed within those defined boundaries.
Exactly. But that very precision brings us right up against a huge philosophical challenge, one famously framed by Alan Turing. He asked that pivotal question, can machines think? But he knew terms like machines and think were vague.
So he sidestepped it.
He did. He proposed the Turing test. Basically, if a computer could chat with a human and fool them into thinking it was human, then for all practical purposes, it could be considered intelligent. No need to define thinking.
Which is clever, but then you get John Searle and his Chinese room argument. And this feels like a fundamental challenge for rule-based systems trying to achieve real understanding.
Absolutely. Searle's thought experiment is powerful. He imagines someone in a room who doesn't know Chinese, but has a huge rule book. Questions in Chinese come in, they look up the rules, follow them precisely, and send out correct answers in Chinese.
So from the outside, it looks like they understand Chinese.
Exactly. They're perfectly manipulating the symbols, the syntax, as Searle called it. But, or argued, the person inside has no idea that for means for, or that it means anything at all. There's no semantics, no actual comprehension.
The machine is just running the program, following the rules, without any grasp of what the symbols actually mean in the world.
Precisely. It might output 4 when asked what's 2 plus 2, but it doesn't understand numbers or addition. It's just rule execution, symbolic manipulation. And that highlights this profound limit for symbolic AI. Just having a massive, complex set of rules, no matter how clever, doesn't automatically mean real understanding or consciousness.
It could work perfectly in its symbolic bubble, but meaning was missing. That working well until it didn't seems key here.
It really is. And here's where it gets, well, really interesting, because that lack of understanding quickly became a very practical problem. It feels like all that early excitement, all that progress in those neat logical systems, it just slammed into a wall when these systems tried to leave the lab.
Yes, stepping out into anything like the real world. This became known as the toy problem trap.
Right. That's the term. And a critical early voice here was Minsky and Papert in their 1969 book, Perceptrons. They noted how these early networks did well on certain tasks and failed on certain other tasks. And crucially, there was no theory to explain what made the difference.
Especially when they worked on small toy versions of a problem, but just broke down on larger versions of the same kind.
Right. They pointed out, for instance, that early perceptrons just couldn't solve the recognition of connectedness problem, a visual puzzle that stumped researchers for ages. And their core insight was deep. No machine can learn to recognize X unless it possesses, at least potentially, some scheme for representing X.
So the perceptrons didn't have the right internal structure, the right way to represent the knowledge needed.
That was their argument. They claimed perceptrons had no way to represent the knowledge required for solving certain problems. It wasn't just a bug, it was fundamental. And this realization actually led many researchers to turn away from network machines for a while. They shifted focus to developing better ideas about knowledge representation. How do you model the world inside the machine?
Recognizing that just processing inputs wasn't enough. The system needed to understand, in some sense, what it was dealing with.
Exactly. Not just react.
Okay, so this need for better representation and the limits of basic rules, that leads us straight into another massive crack in the whole approach.
Yeah.
The combinatorial explosion of ifs.
Oh, yeah. That's a killer. As prediction machines points out, Fundamentally, all machines, hardware or software, are programmed with that basic if-then logic. If this happens, then do that. Simple.
Seems simple.
In a controlled setting, yes. But the number of ifs you need for the real world, it just grows radically, often exponentially. Take their example of a mail delivery robot. Operating outside. Okay, it needs rules for. Is the ground dry or wet? Affects traction. Light or dark? Affects sensors. Human nearby. Safety critical. Rush packages. Priority changes.
And the tricky ones, like, okay to run over squirrels but not cats.
Right. And now what if those rules interact? Like, it's okay to run over squirrels if it's dark, but not if it's light.
Oh boy.
Suddenly, the number of possible situations, the permutations of all these conditions, it just explodes. It becomes completely unmanageable. You just cannot explicitly code for every possibility. It makes the system incredibly brittle. It breaks the moment it encounters something you didn't think of, a total breakdown of fixed rules in a dynamic world.
It sounds like a programmer's absolute nightmare. You just can't foresee everything.
Impossible. And this explosion isn't just a coding headache. It fundamentally limits how rule-based systems handle uncertainty, especially with what the sources call known unknowns.
Prediction machines makes a distinction there, right?
Yeah.
Between known knowns and known unknowns.
Yes, and it's crucial. It raises this big question about machine intelligence. We often expect machines to be perfectly logical, deterministic. But the world isn't like that. When data is sparse or a situation is really new, any rules you try to derive are shaky. That uncertainty becomes the failure point for these deterministic systems.
So known knowns are where prediction works well.
Right. Situations with lots of rich, consistent data, think fraud detection banks have tons of transaction data, or certain medical diagnoses from scans where patterns are well established, even bail decisions based on lots of historical records. In these cases, the machine learns robust patterns. It knows what it's doing, and we know its predictions are likely good. That's the sweet spot.
Okay, but then the known unknowns, that's where the rules break down because the data just isn't there.
Exactly. Situations with very little history. Predicting U.S. presidential elections, for instance, happens only every 4 years. Candidates change. The political climate shifts constantly. It's notoriously hard. 2016 baffled a lot of models.
Right. Or major earthquakes.
Same problem. Thankfully rare, which means very little data to predict timing, location, magnitude accurately. Our models just don't have enough to learn reliable rules. And here's a fascinating contrast. Humans. You and I can recognize a face after seeing it maybe once or twice. Years later, different angle, maybe.
Yeah, usually machines.
Still typically need large amounts of data. Hundreds, thousands of examples to get similar recognition. It shows a deep difference in handling sparse information, a real limit for systems needing explicit rules or massive data sets for everything.
Moving away from the theory and data limits, this brittleness of rules becomes, well, painfully clear, sometimes tragically so, in real-world cases, especially in sensitive areas like medicine and engineering. That warning about AI being dangerous because it doesn't work really hits home when applied, without enough robustness in these critical domains.
It really does. We see this playing out starkly in autonomous driving. The rules, coded by engineers or learned from data, can lead to biased, even fatal outcomes. There's that 2024 research from Peking University on bias, showing how systems might perform differently for pedestrians based on skin tone or gender, just reflecting biases in training data or design.
And then there's the whole Tesla situation.
Right, the controversy around their full self-driving tech. That Washington Post analysis finding 17 fatalities, over 700 crashes involving autopilot FSD. That's not just isolated glitches. It points to a serious breakdown in safety, partly blamed on prioritizing data from certain drivers, essentially using public roads for large-scale testing. The predefined rules just couldn't cope with real-world driving complexity.
Those are devastating examples. But what's also interesting is how a system can fail even when the AI part works, when the prediction rule is actually good.
Ah, the Air Canada cargo example, that's a perfect illustration.
Yeah, they used AI prediction to tackle no-shows, about 20% of shipments, and fill empty cargo space, which was like 45%. The AI was great at predicting which bookings would actually show up, promised a huge improvement.
It did. The prediction machine worked beautifully. But, as the source says, the only wrinkles came in implementation. Even with better predictions, better rules for demand, the whole system stumbled. Why? The ground handlers, the humans, didn't have the knowledge or training to efficiently pack the increased cargo the AI enabled.
So the AI did its job, but the human part of the system wasn't ready.
Exactly. It required significant retraining, process changes. It shows that a perfect rule or prediction isn't enough. The real-world system, the human-AI interaction, the physical logistics, it can still break down if those complementary parts aren't aligned. The perfect rule doesn't guarantee perfect execution.
And it's not just physical systems. Look at chatbots and generative AI. That brittleness shows up there too, especially with inaccurate outputs and what they call confabulation.
Oh, definitely. Early generative models were notorious for this. They were, as one source put it, ignorant of your own ignorance. They'd confidently state popular myths like we only use 10% of our brain, or even outright fake news conspiracy theories with the exact same certainty as stating a basic fact.
No sense of doubt or error.
None. This total lack of insight into its own errors was a massive breakdown in trustworthiness. How can you rely on something that confidently lies without knowing it?
And this leads to that concept of the liar's dividend, right?
Yes, and it's deeply problematic. As deepfakes get better and more common and people realize almost anything online could be AI generated, trust just erodes. The internet becomes even less trustworthy. For centuries, seeing is believing was a pretty reliable guide, but now that rug's been pulled out. It's not just a tech glitch, it's a societal breakdown of trust, of how we even figure out what's real. The basic rules of evidence are challenged.
And even when we try to build safety rules into these systems, they seem really fragile. The whole idea of alignment, trying to stop chatbots spewing toxic stuff.
It's described as extremely fragile. It might make commercial products look okay for casual users, but the sources say it does little against adversaries. People can use the programming interfaces to customize models in ways that just bypass the safety alignment. So even the safety rules themselves are brittle and can be broken. It's a constant cat and mouse game.
And this fragility extends beyond chatbots to things like content moderation online.
For sure, AI is heavily used there, automation from the early days of social media. But there are hundreds of well-known cases of past failure. These rule-based systems really struggle with the gap between the norms of the West and the rest of the world. Platform policies often reflect Western values, which might be too permissive elsewhere or too restrictive.
And you get situations where removal requests target government criticism rather than genuinely harmful stuff.
Exactly. It just shows how context-dependent the rules for harm or appropriateness are. They're not universal, and rigid systems inevitably fail in a diverse, global, changing world.
Which brings us, inevitably, to Isaac Asimov and his 3 laws of robotics. You can't talk about rules breaking down without mentioning them.
The classic example. Law 1, don't harm humans or let them be harmed. Law 2, obey humans unless it conflicts with Law 1. Law 3, protect yourself unless it conflicts with Law 1 or 2. Seems perfectly logical, airtight.
On paper, yes.
But what's fascinating, and kind of the point here, is how these breakdowns aren't just about immature tech or bad data. They reveal this deeper, almost philosophical problem. How do you actually capture all the nuance, the contradictions, the paradoxes of human life and ethics in a rigid set of rules without creating failures?
And Asimov himself explored that.
Absolutely. His own stories are full of examples where the laws lead to problematic contradictions in unexpected situations. They're brilliant fictional illustrations of how even perfectly defined rules can fail spectacularly when faced with real-world complexity and conflicting goals. Life just defies a perfect rulebook.
So this gets us to the core question. Why? Why do rules struggle so much with uncertainty, with human complexity? It makes you rethink what intelligence even is. It seems to be more than just following rules.
It certainly does. Look at the human brain. We're still, as the sources say, a long way from understanding how cognitive processes actually work, how memories are stored, how brain plasticity works. That mystery suggests human intelligence isn't just a set of simple, explicit rules we could easily download.
It's something else, something more flexible, maybe.
Seems likely. Our brains show incredible adaptability, abstraction, things rule-based systems often lack. And when we apply complex AI today, we often hit that opaque internal logic, the black box problem.
Like the bank loan example. The AI minimizes defaults, which is good, but we can't understand why it made specific decisions.
Exactly. We cannot discover all the facts about the contents of the machine learning system's classifications simply by looking at the internal programming implementation. This lack of transparency is a huge breakdown in understanding and control. We build powerful systems whose reasoning we can't fully trace or explain. That undermines trust.
So what does this mean for building AI? It feels like just adding more rules isn't the answer. It might even make things worse, more brittle.
That's what Marvin Minsky argued with his Society of Mind ideas. He observed that systems with too many different kinds of interactions tend to be fragile, but systems with too many similar interactions become too redundant, too rigid to adapt to anything new.
So it's a balancing act, and just adding complexity isn't the solution.
Right. It can actually make the system more prone to failure or too inflexible. It really highlights the limits of trying to predefine rules for everything. You just can't capture every nuance, every exception.
And these limits aren't just practical, they go right down to the theoretical foundations. You mentioned Gödel.
Yeah, Gödel's incompleteness theorems. They showed way back that even in pure mathematics, a logical machine following definite rules need never come to a conclusion. His illustration was Russell's paradox. The class of all classes which are not members of themselves. Is that class a member of itself? A machine trying to answer that gets stuck in an infinite loop. Yes, no, yes, no.
A fundamental breakdown within logic itself.
Exactly. It shows that even perfect rules can lead to contradictions you can't resolve within the system.
If we connect this to the bigger picture then, the challenge isn't just about technical precision.
Not at all. It's about defining the right rules, making sure they scale, stay transparent, and crucially, align with our complex human values. That's way harder than anyone first thought. This theoretical limit also contrasts sharply with human diversity. Our success as a species comes from our ability to self-organize, our diversity, not homogeneity. We aren't a monolith.
But current leading AI, like LLMs, are often built as these centralized monolithic oracles.
Predominantly, yes. Trained for a generic user, often reflecting Western biases, homogenizing diverse data into a single predictable output style. While that's powerful for generating text, it fundamentally struggles to handle real human diversity, nuance, the very decentralized intelligence that defines us.
And that reliance on massive data sets, even if they seem diverse, inevitably brings in bias, right?
Absolutely. If the data reflects societal biases, and most real-world data does the models learn and reinforce them, we saw it with Facebook's ad targeting potentially violating fair housing laws, or NLP models reinforcing gender stereotypes like man is to programmer as woman is to homemaker.
So the AI learns flawed rules because the data itself reflects flawed societal patterns. It holds up a mirror.
A mirror to our imperfections, yes. It's a critical ethical breakdown.
Which leads to the final, maybe biggest challenge looming over all of this, the control problem. How do we make sure these powerful systems align with our goals?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question. Stuart Russell put it starkly. We have no reliable way to make sure that their objectives are the same as our objectives, and that's deeply concerning.
We're already seeing hints of this. Instrumental power seeking.
Yeah, AI agents finding unexpected ways to gain control or resources to meet their program goals, even if those ways aren't what we intended. Like those hide-and-seek agents learning to use environment objects as tools, going beyond the simple task. Or, more seriously, AI in cyber warfare, or lethal autonomous weapons, where human oversight is reduced. And as we said, even the alignment techniques are fragile, can be bypassed by adversaries.
So the system's learned rules or its drive to meet an objective can just diverge from what humans actually want, potentially disastrously.
Exactly. The challenge isn't just making AI smart, it's making it wise, aligned, and beneficial.
So as we wrap this up, it really feels like the whole story of AI is this constant, often humbling struggle with the brittleness of rules. From those early symbolic systems failing outside the lab, to today's advanced models confabulating or reflecting bias, rules alone just aren't enough.
Right. Modern AI, deep learning LLMs, they try to overcome this by learning patterns from data, not just following explicit rules. But as we've seen, they still show their own kinds of brittleness, lack of epistemic humility, not knowing what they don't know, the liar's dividend, perpetuating biases. The struggle continues, just in new forms.
And ultimately, this highlights where human intelligence really shines, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. We navigate those known unknowns with intuition. We learn incredibly well from sparse, messy data. We exercise judgment in ambiguous situations. We adapt to novelty. We grasp complex ethics in ways machines just don't yet.
So as AI advances, the focus isn't just making it smarter.
It's also about understanding its limits, defining where human judgment, intuition, adaptation are truly indispensable. The goal isn't just intelligent machines, but wise systems that complement our uniquely human ability to navigate life's uncertainty.
So here's a final thought for you, listening. If AI constantly struggles when rules break down against messy reality, what does that tell us about intelligence itself? And what responsibilities do we have in setting, refining, maybe even breaking the rules for a future where humans and machines have to coexist and collaborate? How much trust should we place in systems that grapple with the very unpredictability that defines our lives? Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Hopefully that gives you something profound to think about.